But then you said,
You're good? Okay. All right, Dan, you ready? Get a roll call? All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 12th Common Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fire? Yes. Mr. Peschel?
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich?
Yes.
Mr. Bargander?
Here.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Witzel?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Here.
Mr. Butke?
Here.
Mr. Handler?
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of
to the
America.
republic for which it stands,
Public to which
one
it
nation, under God,
one nation,
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Item 3, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. Council may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. There is a phone number to call in, and that's on about a 30-second delay, so we'll wait about a minute and a half to give people ample time to call in with public comment.
Okay, roll call, please.
I'm back. No, I'm up here. We'll just give it about 30 more seconds.
Yeah, would you tell Ing to put me back on whatever I was on? They just dropped me.
We can still hear you. And
Well,
we can
yeah,
see you as
can
well.
get the audio, but you don't have the picture.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right, hearing no, we're not getting any signal that anyone is called, so we'll close the public comment hearing. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 20th, 2020? There a motion by Mr. Bucky, second by Mr. Peschel. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please roll call vote.
Mr. Fire?
Yes.
Mr. Peschel?
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich?
Yes.
Mr. Bargander?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Witzel?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yep.
Mr. Butke?
Yes.
Mr. Handler?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Item E, any staff updates?
I'm not aware of any staff updates at all this evening.
No. All right. Item F, mayor's comments. Employee recognition of Derek Iverson to the police department, May 17th is 10 years. Pat Kilty, Development Services, May 17th, 10 years. And Brian Linsmeyer, Street Division, May 17th, 10 years. Thank you all very much for your service to the city. Item G, council comments. Any comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll go to any reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any reports? Seeing none, we'll go to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to receive and place on file approving all recommended actions in the consent agenda? Motion by Mr. Fire, a second by Mrs. Spiros. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Fire?
Yes.
Mr. Peschel?
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich?
Yes.
Mr. Bargander?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Witzel?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Butke?
Yes.
Mr. Handler?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Item K, second reading of ordinance number 1433, municipal code amendment request by the city of Marshfield to amend chapters 4, 9, and 18 in order to establish a licensing program for regulating short-term rental housing, presented by Bryce Hembrook, city planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the second reading of the ordinance. I'll kind of briefly go through the request. Over the past few months, staff has presented some options, Plan Commission and the Common Council, on how to regulate short-term rentals, how to comply with state statutes. The city's current ordinance is not in compliance with state statutes. Thus, we've decided to create a licensing procedure through Chapter 9, which would create a procedure for obtaining a short-term rental license. And we are also proposing amendments to Chapter 4 to amend room tax procedure, and then also amending some parts of Chapter 18 for zoning to define what a short-term rental is, remove use that a use is considered under. This licensing program will allow the city to track the operators of short-term rentals in the city, and also to collect room tax. The proposed regulations are included in the packet. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. All short-term rental owners in Marshfield will need to obtain a license from the city clerk, and also obtain necessary permits and licenses from county and state agencies. Our license fee will likely be $10. Any short-term rental owner that fails to receive a license will need to either cease operation or go through the process of receiving a license. As soon as if this is approved, letters will be sent out to people that we are thinking are operating a short-term rental, and we would basically guide them through the process of, hey, this is changing. This is how you go through the process. So we'll work to get the news out and to help them through the steps to become compliant with our new changes. We also do plan on adding some information for them online on our website, and then with all these changes, we will ensure that the city is complying with state statutes. So, as I mentioned, this is a second reading, and thus the recommendation would be to approve ordinance number 1433.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 1433? A motion by Mr. Fisher. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Wagner. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wagner. Mr. Wagner, did you have a discussion? No? All right, Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. The licensing fee for the city is about $10, you said?
Correct.
Is there any way that those that went through the hoops of spending hundreds of dollars to get rezoning and all of that done with those properties could be waived for that $10? I realize it's not much, but at least it's an effort. As of our records, I believe there was one person that went through that process in 2017, and it doesn't appear that they're operating a short-term rental. We could allow for that if they would apply. I guess that would be up to the council to decide. We can look to waive that, but then as far as any of the state and county fees, we would not be able to waive those. Correct. And do we know how long those licensing permits, whatever else? I see you have a tourist rooming house license from the county and a state-issued permit, seller's permit, state of Wisconsin. Do we have any idea how long those are good for? Is that a yearly, biannual? What is that?
So it appears from their website that there is an annual license fee for the state. There is also a one-time pre-inspection fee from the state. And then the Wood County and Marathon County licenses vary slightly. But it looks like there is also a one-time pre-licensing inspection fee from Wood County, and then a license fee of $126. I believe that is annual for Wood County. As of Marathon County, I don't remember offhand.
Okay. And I know that there was some discussion of this at our last meeting. I think it's on the 4th page of your portion of the packet. It would be underneath the additional regulations that are not being proposed, but could possibly include. Are we not including those items? Is that the intent as we move forward here?
Correct.
Okay.
because I do not want to see the 180-day cap. If we're looking at 7-day rentals or, 6-day rentals and they have a day to clean in between, I don't see why we have to have them shut down for half the year. But as long as those are not specified, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Fire,
Yes.
Mr. Paschal,
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich,
Yes.
Mr. Bargander,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Witzel,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
yes,
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Handler.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Item L, request to approve resolution number 2020-16, certified survey map for Labs Children Trust located at the northwest corner of McMillan Street and Meadow Avenue, presented by Tom Turchi, city engineer.
Good evening. The enclosed CSM and municipal ordinance requires the additional 7 feet of right-of-way on McMillan Street. And typically we bring these to the Board of Public Works prior to bringing it to the Common Council. There is a pending sale that is waiting on this CSM. Therefore, they've asked to try to have this expedited. If you have read your agendas tonight, you'll notice that the resolution included with the agenda is not correct. But that's due to, I had an issue with a error in my programming and it kept saving it the incorrect way, but I do have the correct one in the resolution folder. Therefore, I approve the acceptance of additional right-of-way on McMillan Street adjacent to Meadow Avenue.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 2020-16? A motion by Mr. Butke, second by Mr. Fire. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Sounds good. We'll go the other way this time. Mr. Handler?
Yes.
Mr. Butke?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
yes,
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Witzel?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Bargander?
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich?
Yes.
Mr. Paschal?
Yes.
Mr. Fire?
Yes.
Who was the second on that one again?
Fire.
Fire. Okay. Thank you. Motion is approved.
Yep. Thank you. Item M, update on the city's financial situation during COVID-19, presented by Ron Amon, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor. So a lot of things are unknown at this point. We wanted to give an informational update on finances for the city for 2020. As you know, the city is different than private businesses that are selling a product or even other municipal units such as the state, which relies heavily on sales tax, or even other cities that might rely on tourism, or we're looking at an article today about La Crosse, was really dependent on the convention center to generate income. So we've got a couple parts here. First, I wanted to start with just kind of a qualitative overview of the city services and staffing. What I asked was that department heads just send me in 15 words or less, what has the effect been on your department, staffing, and service levels. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to buzz through those really quick for each department and stop and see if you have any questions for, looks like a lot of the department heads are here. Then we'll move on to some of the more finance stuff. So just in order that I received them, engineering division, business as usual, the same annual bidding process as the normal activities for this time of year. Public Works Administration, business as usual, bidding process is a normal activity. Media access has been swamped, as you can imagine, moving everything to streaming, got a lot of requests for church programs and all the public access channels. I know Tom's been putting in a ton of hours there. Business development and inspections, permits are still being taken out through email, and Josh indicated that the number of permits was actually up over last year. Inspectors are still out in the office and doing inspections, so that's largely business as usual. Wastewater, Sam noted staffing, service levels are about the same. Revenues might actually be up a little bit during this time. The assessor operating normally, though remotely for the most part, getting through their work. The clerk is proceeding as normal. They moved a lot of their customer service to phone and mail, and then just been swamped with all the election items going on. Increase in absentee voting, postage, cleaning, sanitizing, everything. Streets, they split up their crews, but operating as normal, working on the street projects for the summer. Parks and Rec, canceled, closed the community centers, rental facilities, programs and activities. Seasonal and part-time employees have either been laid off or not being hired except at the cemetery for mowing. Library, as you know, is kind of being run with a skeleton crew while they're not taking in people. They just recently opened the curbside pickup. Admin, HR, nothing, business as usual, no significant changes. All the business activities of the city continuing. Finance, business as usual, payroll, accounts payable, working through our audit. Like clerks, we moved all our customer service to phone, email. So the volume there is the same, just a different method. Police indicated call volume is a little different mix, but largely unchanged overall. Fire indicated, they've, are not doing some routine fire inspections currently, but other than that, largely business as usual. EMS call volume is down a little bit, but they're still, service level is still high. And then for IT, largely business as usual. Part-time employees are off. We have interns, some document processors are off until the stay-at-home order or safer-at-home order is lifted. So I know I went through those quick, but that's just kind of like a sentence on each. Do you have any questions for me or any of the department heads on kind of the service and staffing levels we have right now?
Any questions from Mr. Wagner?
Yes, sir. Ron, have you taken a look at the individual revenue streams from the city and been able to red flag any of those that might be being affected by the shutdown? For instance, we know room tax is in trouble. We know that room tax is going to be down significantly, and we know what some of the ramifications of that are. But what about are there other flows, revenue flows that we should be aware of, that we should look at? Or are there any ideas how to mitigate any of the losses we're going to take?
Sure. That's actually, I have a section on that in just a little bit, Ed. So I'll kind of go over the property tax, where we're at risk, room tax. That's coming up here in just a second. Any other questions for department heads before I get to that part?
Doesn't appear so go ahead and go on.
All right. So, the key item, and I don't know if everyone is aware of this, is, obviously with the financial situation, you can expect an uptick with people struggling to pay their July property tax payment. But most of that risk is with the county. So would Marathon County make us whole for property taxes in the event that there's non-payments? We're made whole and the county has to manage that. Marathon County also makes us whole for special assessment and personal property tax. For Wood County, we would have to pursue those non-payments, but that's a small portion of everything. So largely our largest revenue item for 2020 at least, we have very little risk here. Some other things that we're doing, so a lot of the other government or the general fund revenues expenses can move in opposite directions, and that's kind of unknown. For example, interest rates are down, our investment income will be down. Government aids could go either way. Reimbursement for staff costs, we plan on submitting later. I know we're eligible possibly for some airport aids. We've gotten some EMS aids. We're tracking expenses for like reimbursement for, all the extra election expenses. So the net of all that is unknown. The couple things so that's general fund, really focusing on the general fund. Our revenues are largely fixed in that case. For non-general revenue funds, the two main areas are room tax will obviously be way down. 30% of that goes to the city, 70% goes to convention CVB. CVB. The other non-general fund that you'll see affected is the shared ride service, the taxi service, because rides are obviously way down. But again, we will be applying, I saw something today that will likely be made whole, at least for the short term, on our shared ride service. Like I mentioned, we'll be seeking reimbursement for COVID-19 eligible expenses, election costs, supply costs, cleaning, sanitizing. So we'll keep accruing all of those. So 2020, I mean, we had some pre-existing financial problems that won't go away, but by and large, city revenues should be strong, and our service levels are still almost full, other than the notable exceptions of library and some of the Parks and Rec programs having to be delayed for the moment. Really the real impact will probably be in 2021 when everything shakes out with the state and the aids and those kinds of things. So that's where we're at now. We have a qualitative overview for now. We're scheduling the audit presentation for May 26th. And then from there, when we get the May financials post-audit sometime in June, we'll have a better look at everything. But again, like I said, we're not a private business. We're not selling a product. And most of our essential services are still going strong. So I'll stop there and open up for questions again.
Any questions for Ron? Mr. Butke.
This one is for Justin. Justin, without the rentals at the Wildwood Station, do you see, is that a big impact on your budget?
Financially, it's not a huge impact, but it is an impact. There'll be some cost savings, obviously, with no staff dedicated to cleaning. There'll be cost savings with electricity, water, garbage, refuse collection. Some savings with. There's some savings, but there is going to be a loss there. Not only that building, but all of our buildings, Oak Avenue, our park shelters. So there is a loss there. That's why we're reluctant to hire any type of part-time seasonal kids to do any work this summer yet.
And I commend you for looking at the summer help and doing that. Thank you.
Stephen, Mr. Hendler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You were talking about things that aren't happening. For example, working with a skeletal crew in the library and of course Parks and Recs too. Are there any thoughts given to potential furloughs?
So I guess you'd have to so kind of what I read through is each department's kind of taken their service levels, what they're able to do, and their kind of staffing into consideration and adjusted accordingly. So if you were looking at a furlough, I guess you need a little more detail on what you were thinking for existing services.
I mean, for the library, for example, if the library isn't fully staffed and working, as somebody said, with a skeletal crew, what about the other people? What are they doing? Are they still on the payroll?
Lori, go ahead.
Yes, we are, a number of people are on unemployment. They have been furloughed. Some are working reduced hours. A number are working no hours. And then we have a number of people that are working remote and in the building from time to time. Now we have added more staff, still limited by direction by the Department of Public Inspection to keep people spaced far apart to provide services pickup.
Thank you.
We have reduced the number of people working.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you very much, Lori, for the explanation.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The mayor had asked me to work with Ron in looking into some possible cost savings if we need to furlough people, for maybe a day a week or a day every 2 weeks, whatever. And Ron's been working on that with his staff. But I would like to say that just to remind people, sort of what Ron was talking about a little bit, we don't make a product or service. And most of what we have, our core businesses, I mean, we continue to have work for the lion's share of people that's pretty steady. That could tail off. I think the real issue is, does this continue on into June and July with safer at home? And if it does, maybe it starts taking a toll on the amount of work available for some people, and we'll need to look at that as a possibility. But you look at some of the things that people do here in building inspection, payroll, accounts payable, many of the different jobs, it really hasn't been a noticeable slowdown the way it would be in a business that was partially or completely shut down from operations. So that's why we haven't gotten too far down the road on that one as yet.
I'd like to follow that up if I may, Steve.
Sure. Yep.
The Marshfield Medical Center, it furloughed people. It also reduced the salary of some of the doctors because the work isn't there and the income isn't there. And they're in the service field too, but I always have trouble with services, and services can be defined in many different ways. And I think we need to have a contingency plan in the event that happens.
I think that's very wise, and I think that's something we need to work on more diligently, perhaps, and prepare for. Especially, like I said, if this is going to continue farther into the summer. I will say on the clinic side, though, that, and I think many of you know this, they rather early on in COVID-19 actually shut down many of their services. They canceled a lot of appointments. They ended elective surgeries. I know I was there for an appointment one day, fairly early in COVID-19 time, and I was surprised that they even took my request for an appointment because I felt like I was walking around in a fairly empty building. So they have definitely furloughed people, and they've definitely, I think, reduced some salary, but their revenue has got to be way down. None of this is to take away from your core comment, which is that we need to have a contingency plan in place should this go on, farther into the summer, as some people believe that it will.
Ron and Steve, are we, the state has said that they will be able to recoup some of the cost to the municipalities. Are you all keeping a good, accurate, running tab, I guess, if you will, of all the expenses that can come back to us? Or I would imagine they're not going to match it dollar for dollar, but there has to be something.
Good question, Mayor. I have, and I need to follow up with the department heads. I've been asking them to keep a running count. Initially, the state was going to have a deadline for submission of these requests, but now it's just going to be throughout the entire COVID-19 incident, so they're allowing us to continue to accumulate them. At last check, we're up to around $10,000 of reimbursement that I'll be asking for. It's not as broad-based as you might think. It's largely for us limited to things like extra election costs. If you've been to the polling sites, you know that we've constructed, our Public Works Department constructed these plexiglass barriers to keep the poll workers separated from the voters. That costs some money. There's been purchases of personal protective equipment for public safety. There's been a lot of additional costs in cleaning and disinfecting and sanitizing supplies, and some other costs we've incurred that have brought us to around $10,000. But we'll keep a running total, and as we get wind of the fact that we're nearing what the state might consider to be the end of the incident, we'll submit for everything. Hopefully we get it all, but I think based upon their criteria, we should get the lion's share of what we're tabulating.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Wagner?
If I remember correctly, when the county does its final settlements with the city after the second collection of taxes, they make the city whole. Whatever is levied, we do something, whether they receive it or not. So I don't think on the property tax end of it we're as much at risk as the county is. But I do think Ron's looking at some of those revenue streams. The only one I'd be worried about would be if the state comes up with a deficit, whether they're going to end up taking it out of our shared aid, either highway or just general government aid. That's the only thing I'd be worried about right now. And as long as we're not digging ourselves in a hole anywhere else, I'm relatively satisfied as to where we're at right now.
Correct, and I just reiterate, you're correct that the county's really at risk for the property tax payments, and the state aids are the ones that are really kind of up in the air. Besides that, once we get into June, July, we're in a much better place to be able to forecast everything else. but a lot of unknowns at this time.
Yeah, I think right now, Ron and I were on a conference call recently with some League of Wisconsin Municipalities officials, and there was a state representative on that call for a while as well. And the belief seems to be, at least as recent as maybe a week and a half ago, that the state is not talking at all about backing off on its commitment to local municipalities for the state aids and transportation. That could change. I mean, honestly, the whole thing is kind of an evolving situation with COVID-19, but right now, they're not hinting that we will be looking at reductions. Having said that, looking at the 2021 budget and what we get from the state in terms of shared revenue, connecting highway aid, transportation aid, if the state does not start to see collections come in from business resuming soon, undoubtedly they're going to look to pass some of the pain on to local units of government. So hopefully we come out of COVID earlier rather than later, or their sales tax and income tax deficiencies will, roll down to us in 2021.
Thank you. Ron, do you have anything further?
No, that's it. Anybody think of any follow-up questions, feel free to contact me. We'll do our best to answer them.
All right. Thank you very much. Item N, update on employee travel restrictions during COVID-19, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you. Your agenda actually says presented by Jen Raiku, Human Resources Director, but she does have the afternoon and evening off, and I agreed to take this. It may seem like I'm reading a statement here. I kind of am. I want to make sure I get things right. Jen and I have been dealing with this quite a bit, obviously. Jen mostly throughout COVID-19, and she's done an outstanding job of trying to keep up with all the federal law changes and how it impacts the city. But just kind of reading from the note that we kind of put together, that she kind of compiled, basically, the council, as you know, back on April 28th, did not embrace the proposed travel policy for employees, appearing to be too restrictive in the council's mind, and that, certainly understand that. Since that time, in the last 2 weeks, we've had a number of travel-related items that we've had to address. Every situation is reviewed individually. Guidance is provided when appropriate. We've consulted with external resources like Wood County Health Department and the Marshfield Clinic. Restrictions continue to change, and as they're lifted and moved and modified, we'll keep addressing these on a case-by-case basis. Our intention, just so you know, is not to recommend or authorize any kind of travel, but we'll work with individuals to make sure that they're safely able to return to work. That's our primary focus. All employees are expected to follow social distancing guidelines and maintain that 6-foot distancing when they're with people at home, when they're at work, when they're, wherever they're at in their travels. We will ask each employee to review their activity before they return to work to ensure they've been able to limit contact and not present a risk of exposure to those with them and around them. This is done through self-monitoring. If for any reason an employee is not able to maintain that distancing or feels that their interactions have compromised their health in some way, we would ask that they consider working remotely for 14 days, and that's provided they can. Most of our employees are able to telework. Not all of them, but the majority are, so that's an opportunity for them. Employees may be recommended to wear masks upon their return based upon their circumstances. During the 14 days after exposure, they should monitor themselves for symptoms. These are all things you've heard about through the CDC guidelines and other authorities. If symptoms do occur, they should immediately notify their supervisor and HR and then self-isolate at that point. And also, if those symptoms occur, they should contact HR regarding any benefits they might be entitled to under recent federal legislation. So kind of putting a capsule on it and kind of trying to put, like I said, kind of a bow and ribbon around where we're at. We don't have a policy, and the policy presented to you 2 weeks ago had been recommended to us by our Labor Law Council. But I think we're trying to be as diligent as we can to work with our staff leaders and their staffs to try and minimize the risk to our employees from coworkers. And we do ask those questions, and every situation is a little bit different. You can imagine that some travels pose greater risks than others, and we're trying to be as reasonable as we can. But we definitely want anybody who is presenting any symptoms or has compromised themselves by being in situations that are, potentially risky to consider working from home or to self-isolate. At this time, I take any questions.
Questions from council? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Item O, update on small business grant program, presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor. It was a little over 3 weeks ago, I think you reached out to staff and asked to develop a program to help small businesses in the community. And within a short amount of time, we were able to develop a program and get some money out to those businesses. I think as recently as Saturday, checks were already received. So we had a total of 69 applications for this program. We were able to fund currently 52, and I'll address that in a second. The overall total request for funding was $140,000, but recall we capped those up to $2,000, and some people had additional requests for mortgage or rent or lease or additional utility payments. They submitted for those. Obviously, we were limited to $2,000, but it was important to see how much total requests there were to see what the actual needs were. So I was actually appreciative that they submitted some of those bills, even though we couldn't provide assistance with those. So all told, we were able to fund $78,000 worth of requests currently. We had 12 different types of businesses we were able to help. Primarily, we helped the salon, retail, and bar and restaurant businesses. As you can imagine, most of those have not been able to get any additional funding through any other government program. And with sole proprietors, they've struggled even to get unemployment in many cases. So any kind of assistance was well received and greatly appreciated. So certainly want to thank the council for their swift action and the Economic Development Board for their action as well to move this forward. I think getting the money in the hands of the businesses quickly was important, and received a lot of great messages from those businesses thanking the council and the Economic Development Board and the mayor for their efforts. I think it helps a lot of people relieve some stress and be able to sleep at night a little bit better to help out with some of these payments. Just to go back a little bit, the Economic Development Board did have their meeting in May last Thursday, and there were a number of businesses that were not qualified for the program due to the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions not being up to standards or being delinquent. And a lot of that had to do with paperwork or lack of filing something. And we found out in many cases it was an accountant error or a timing thing. And so we were kind of rigid about the requirement. We wanted to make sure that people met that. Or people were unable to, they had some back taxes, either personal or property taxes. The EDB felt compelled to still help those folks and asked us to extend the program, allowing those people that were either delinquent or not in good standing to correct those actions in the next week, and so we could still provide funding for them. So a lot of them, even by the EDB meeting, had already made those corrections, and so those folks would be eligible for funding. So we don't have the total final numbers yet because we're still working through some of those things. We will have those within a week, though. But overall, well received. People were extremely grateful and thankful for this program. So I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions from the council?
Josh, I have a question.
Oh, that is them.
Who did Mackey get involved in this thing?
Our review panel included Karen Olson from Mackey, Kaylee Gomez from the Main Street, and also Ron Dickrell from the EDB. So we divvied up the applications, and each member reviewed the different applications.
Okay.
Josh, just to add to that, the intent of the review from each of those people was to verify eligibility requirements were met, correct?
Correct, yep. And the documentation and everything was, yep.
As opposed to a competitive review per se.
Correct.
I have a follow-up question. Out of the people, how many people did you say were helped with this?
52 so far.
Okay. So what was the ratio between people belonging to the Mackey organization and non-Mackey members?
We didn't look that up. I guess we certainly could, but that was not a question on the application, and I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything further? Mr. Butke.
Yeah, Josh, maybe you want to touch on this, but we learned that the utility, I believe last night was having a meeting, and they were possibly looking at coming up with some funding too. I don't know how that turned out. Do you have any information?
Yep, I did participate in that meeting and heard the discussion. The Utility Commission, I think, is asking the staff to go back and look at options for a program. They didn't define it exactly. I think they were interested in maybe expanding the program beyond the city limits, because obviously the Marshfield Utility Service Area goes beyond the city limits, so they wanted to open it up to their customers. But they didn't really set up a program, but I think there's interest. You know, they and I don't want to speak for them and throw around some numbers, but I think they would be interested in helping possibly with utility payments or some other things. But that was a discussion last night, and I think they were cautious about doing anything right away, just because I think they know this could be long term. And right now, I think a lot of utility bills are deferred in the short term, and so people may not be paying them just because they can't get their power or water shut off. But once that restriction's lifted, they'll know the impact of, you know, either lost revenue or people that aren't going to pay their bills in the short or long term. So don't really want to speak for them, but I think there's definitely an interest from them to do something in the medium term. Oh, Nick's on here too. I guess he could address that if I misspoke at all.
No, I think Josh did a really good job of recapping where we're at. It's something that we're working on, and we'll continue to bring it back to the commission for review and to move forward.
All right, seeing nothing further, we will, first of all, before we go, Josh, you and everybody, your team and everybody that you dealt with at Mackey and Main Street and everything, what a great job you did. And I mean, we all really, really appreciate what you did. So thank you very much. It was a job very well done. Item P, the appointment of Deb Johnston, 1507 North Broadway Avenue to the Library Board to complete a term ending April 30th, 2021, presented by Bob McManus. We went through that last time, so I'll just look for a motion to approve Deb Johnston to the Library Board. Motion by Mr. Witzel, second by Mr. Peschel. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Butke, did you have a... Yeah,
I just, you know, I brought up about the, when we get new employees and stuff. And I know, thank God we have citizens that come forward and do this, but sometimes, you know, and they probably don't want to come in front of the council, but it'd be nice to know these people. I don't know either one of them, but sometimes you can attach a face to the library board. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but first of all, I'd like to recognize them and thank them for joining.
Anything further from the council? Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, we do usually put a letter of request or even an email that they submit talking about their background and experience and interest. I didn't see if that was the case this time, but that's a normal thing for us to do.
I believe that was on the last one because this is just for the appointment. Anything further? A roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Mr. Fire.
Yes.
Mr. Peschel.
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich.
Yes.
Mr. Bargander.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Mr. Witzel.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros.
Yes.
Mr. Butke.
Yes.
And Mr. Handler.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Item Q, there is a item Q, appointment of Ginger Cornish, 808 South Oak Street to the vacant position of second alternate on the Board of Appeals. You will see in your packet that she does have a letter, email to begin with, and a very extensive resume. I think she will be a very good fit. There is no vote at this time. She'll be on for the next council meeting for your approval. Do you have any questions on that? No? Just before we go into closed session, I don't know if you all heard it virtually out there, but the F-18s that they just flew by, and man, that was something. Item R, adjourn to closed session pursuant to the Wisconsin Statutes Chapter 19.85, 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Motion to go into closed session by Mr. Witzel, second by Mrs. Spiros. Roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Mr. Hendler?
Yes.
Mr. Bucky?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros? Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Witzel?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Bargander?
Yes.
Mr. Rosendich?
Yes.
Mr. Peschel?
Yes.
And Mr. Fire? Motion is approved. We are in closed session.